In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the one God, Amen. Welcome to our new episode on Pentecost. Today we will reflect on comparing Pentecost and Babel, the Tower of Babel. The Genesis account of the Tower of Babel tells us that after Noah's flood, everyone in the world spoke the same language. As the population began to grow, people moved to new areas. A group of people moved to the plain of Shinar. We know it as Babylonia or part of Iraq. There they decided to build a tower that would reach to the heavens. They wanted to make a name for themselves, and they also did not want to be scattered to other areas of the earth. Some scholars think that these people remembered the great flood of Noah. Apparently, they did not believe that God would keep his word. They did not believe in the covenant of the rainbow, that God promised to not destroy the world again with water, to create a means of escape. They began to build the tower with baked bricks that were sealed together with tar. Perhaps they were trying to build a stationary type of Noah's Ark. They may have been trying to outwit God and escape judgment for their sins. Other scholars think the Babel people thought they could build a tower and reach to heaven and somehow become gods. To become equal with God, how many lost souls do you know who are trying to get to heaven in some way or other than God's way? No one comes to the Father except through faith in Jesus Christ the Lord. Remember, Adam and Eve were misled by Satan that they would become like God. Part of the judgment that God allows sinful humans to endure is to allow them to become their own gods. On our own, man is never good enough, powerful enough, smart enough, creative enough, loving enough, or holy enough to become a God and save himself. Before the resurrection of Jesus, the dead, Pentecost for the Jews was a time to celebrate God giving the law to the Jews, the law on tablets of stone. Pentecost for the Christian is a time to celebrate God placing the Holy Spirit into the hearts of believers. Pentecost was the beginning of the church age. There is the BC Pentecost that Jews still celebrate today. Today we enjoy the AD Pentecost, where God, through the work of the Holy Spirit, writes his law of love in our hearts. The Holy Spirit enables man to keep Jesus' new command to love our fellow humans as Jesus loved. It is helpful to look at the differences between the good and the evil, the spiritual and the earthly, the godly and the ungodly. Let us look for a while and compare Babel and Pentecost. Number one, Babel displayed the spirit of arrogance and pride. On the other hand, Pentecost displayed the power of love. The Babylonians were so proud that the Lord said they thought that they could do anything that they wanted. He destroyed the tower to remind them that he was sovereign. They wanted to become gods. On Pentecost, the 120, the upper room, wanted to become like Jesus. From that time till now, the church has been characterized by love. 2. Babel divided men through language. Pentecost united men through the Holy Spirit, provided gifts of languages and tongues. The Babylonians were using their common language to empower themselves and to escape the judgment of God. Today, there are hundreds of language and dialect groups on the earth. On Pentecost, the Holy Spirit enabled the early church to speak in the language of all of the people who had come from all over the ancient world to celebrate Pentecost. The language of the Babylonians was being used to build an earthly kingdom of crafty, evil men. The language of Pentecost were used to tell the world that Jesus was the Lord, the Messiah. Believers spoke in languages that all could understand and explained that the promised Holy Spirit had been given to all who would believe. They told the crowd of the need for them to believe in Jesus Christ. 3. Babel brought confusion, but Pentecost brought peace. Our world is filled with people who are confused about the truth. Many are trying to teach our children that there is no real truth. Jesus said that He was the way, the truth, and the life, and that man can only come to God on God's terms. Those terms include belief in faith in Jesus. He promises a peace that the world does not give. The early church and we live in a world that is full of war, unrest, and confusion. In the heart of a Christian is a peace that passes all understanding. 4. Babel shows man full of himself. Pentecost shows us man full of God. As it was in Babylon, the spirit of rebellion, selfishness, greed, and all manner of sin is very strong today. Man wants to do things his way, to take things into his own hands. In the upper room, the early church obeyed the teachings of Jesus to wait in Jerusalem for the Holy Spirit and for power. When will this world ever learn that there will be no real peace and justice and mercy for all until the world begins to do things God's way? The Spirit-filled church changed their world and continues to change the world one person at a time. As Peter preached his famous Pentecost sermon, individual believers witnessed to individual crowds, members of the saving story of Jesus, the Messiah. Babylonians wanted to further their power. Christians wanted to spread the power, the love of the Lord. 5. Babel brought the destruction of the tower. Pentecost brought the foundation of the church that we have today. The people who lived on the plain of Shinar had to have known of the story of Noah. They had to have known that there were certain things that God had forbidden. Yet they did their own thing and tried to get away with their sin. As a result, God poured judgment upon their works. He changed their language and scattered them over the face of the whole earth. On the day of Pentecost, God began to build His church on the rock, Jesus Christ. He is our foundation. He is our rock. The Babylonian tower and the Jewish temple had been built with hands, constructed by man. On Pentecost, the believers in Jesus became temples of the living God. Temples not built with hands. Their hearts were just as full of the Spirit of God as the Holy of Holies in the temple was full of the Spirit of God. The day of Jesus' crucifixion, the veil of the temple was torn apart from top to bottom. God reached down and symbolically said, "Through my beloved Son, Jesus, man can come into my presence." Through Jesus, and only through Jesus, man may become holy. Jesus is our sacrifice and our high priest. Does His Spirit live within you? I hope so. Well, this is all we have for you today. God bless you, and see you in a new episode on Pentecost.